So in the last lesson, we managed to successfully implement our search bar, but now we want to be able to go back to our original list of all of our items. For example, when we click on the cross button, right? That's the normal behavior that users have gotten used to when they clear the search bar. So let's go into our to-do list view controller extension, which is the part that deals with our search bar methods. And let's go and create a new delegate method here. And the method that we're going to use is, of course, relating to the search bar. And we're going to look for the delegate method that is search bar text did change. So this triggers the delegate method when the text inside the search bar has changed. So that means every single letter I type in here is going to trigger this delegate method. But also, when I go from a whole bunch of text to no text, this delegate method is also going to be triggered. Now I can isolate that particular instant by checking inside this delegate method. So whenever there are any changes inside the text of the search bar, I can see if the search bar dot text dot count, which looks at the number of characters in the string or the search bar text, is equal to 0. And because of where this if statement exists, it means that text inside the search bar has changed, but it has also gone down to 0. So when we first load up the app and the search bar has no characters inside, this method, this delegate method, is not going to trigger because the text has not changed. And it's only when the text has changed and it's gone down to 0, which pretty much describes the time point when I click that cross button, does this part of the code inside this if statement get triggered. So inside here, I'm simply going to call load items, which, if you remember, has a default request that just fetches all of the items from my persistent store, just as we had up here in our view did load. So now if we run our app and let's try and check it out, let's search for save, hit search, and then we're going to click the cross button, and you can see that we are now reverted to our original list of items. Now there's just one niggling thing. The fact that our keyboard has not dismissed itself and our cursor is still flashing in the search bar. Now, how can we get it to go back to the original state where the search bar doesn't have a cursor and the keyboard is dismissed? So in order to do that, we need to call upon a method called resign first responder. So telling the search bar to stop being the first responder. Now, we're going to do it inside here after we call load items, and we grab a reference to the search bar that we've got, and we're saying resign first responder, which notifies this object, i.e. the search bar, that it has been asked to relinquish its status as the first responder in its window. Now that sounds pretty dramatic, right? It's like, you're being overthrown or something. But actually, all it refers to is that it should no longer be the thing that is currently selected. So no longer have the cursor, and also the keyboard should go away because we are no longer editing it anymore. Basically, go to the background, go to the original state you were in before you were activated. Now, whenever you're writing methods to affect the user interface, you tend to want it to happen in the foreground. Now, if we run our app and have an active session, if I click on the pause button here in the debug console, you can see that we can trigger a debug session. And it's at this point that you can see that we've got actually multiple threads that are running, but only one of them is the main thread in our queue. So for example, if I decided to make a network call to, say, a Firebase database on the main thread, then it means that it has to go over the internet, grab the data back, and no matter how long that process takes, it's going to freeze your app until it completes, which is why we tend to complete those tasks in the background using another thread, which means that our user interface is not going to freeze up while we're waiting for that process to complete. And on the background thread, once that process is complete, then the data gets delivered back and we can update the user interface using the main thread. But in our case, while background tasks are happening, we need to grab the main queue so that we can dismiss our search bar even if background tasks are still being completed. So in order to do that, we have to tap into the dispatch queue. And this is the object that manages the execution of work items. So it's almost like when you're submitting an application for a visa, right, to an embassy. And you have somebody at that embassy who is prioritizing who should be processing your visa. So for example, if you were a diplomat or you paid for, extra fast service, then your passport might get sent by the manager to the guy who's, working 24/7 stamping visas so that your visa processing happens immediately. However, if you are just a standard person trying to get a visa to, somewhere exotic for the winter, then you might get shuttled to, the guy who only works 1 hour a day. And they have so many tasks lined up that it might take you a week before you get your visa processed and get your passport back. So the dispatch queue is that manager who assigns these projects to different threads. And we're going to ask it to grab us the main thread. And this is where you should be updating your user interface elements. And then we're going to tap into a async method. And inside this block of code, we're going to insert our search bar updating code. So whenever you're trying to move code inside Xcode, it's a little bit tricky because it's a matter of timing. You have to click on it and wait for the arrow to appear and the cursor to disappear before you start dragging. And now you can move your code. So now we're saying ask the dispatch queue to get the main queue and then run this method on the main queue. So now if I run my app and we hit search, then we get back all the items that has the word save. But when we dismiss the word save, then our keyboard pops away and our cursor disappears from our search bar, all because of this line of code being run in the foreground. Now, in the next lesson, we're going to take Core Data much further, and we're going to learn about one of its main features, which is establishing relationships, or what we might call graphs, inside Core Data. And we're going to turn our simple to-do list into one that's more like a real-life to-do list by having a separate to-do list for various categories. So for all of that and more, I'll see you on the next lesson.